Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As the brother introduced me, my name is Yoshua Evans, or some people know me as Joshua Evans. It's the same. I was born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina in a very, very strict religious Methodist upbringing. I was raised by my grandparents who, as they say, old-fashioned. We were very religious in the sense that we went to church every Sunday. We went to church Sunday evenings and sometimes on Wednesdays. And then Wednesdays became more regular as I got more older. That was considered in the South very religious. You were considered a very good patron of the church if you went Sunday evening, and Wednesday. And that was not very difficult considering the fact that the church from my home was separated by two houses. You walk out of my house, you took a right, you passed one house, you passed another house, you walked straight into the wall of the church. So it was not very difficult for me to go to church that often. And that was how I was raised. You know, we went to church. Before we ate, we prayed. Before I went to sleep, I prayed. Every time my grandmother had any commotion happen in the house, she prayed. The Bible was always open. We always read the Bible. My grandfather was always teaching me about Noah and Moses and David and Jesus and all these good things. So this was just the environment that I was brought up in. My mother had stepped out of the picture. My father was working 2 jobs, which was the reason I was being raised by my grandparents. And this continued on until about 13 or 14 years of age. At about 13 or 14, I decided to start attending the youth services on Saturday evenings at my church. Youth services on Saturday evening were quite different from a normal Methodist Sunday service. Methodist services are very formal. You don't talk, you sit down, you listen to the service, you get up, you go outside of the church, and then you talk to each other, greet each other, and you go home. But Saturday evenings were quite different. They were held in the gym, and there was music, and there was games. We played basketball, we played all types of different games, and then we ate. We ate pizza, we ate hamburgers or grilled out or whatever they did on Saturday evenings. And then at the end, the youth minister would give about a 30-minute sermon, on whatever the topic was that he decided to give it on. And the youth minister was a 19-year-old friend of mine. As I started going to the youth services, we became very good friends. And he was attending a university in Greenville called Bob Jones University. Anybody familiar with the South and with Bible colleges, Bob Jones will ring a bell very much. It's considered one of the most conservative Christian colleges in the country. I wanted to attend Bob Jones as well, and he was attending Bob Jones, and his major was textual criticism. Any of you here who might be a major of religion or anything of that nature might understand what textual criticism is. Textual criticism, to try to make a huge field very visible, it's a study that takes many manuscripts, any type of manuscript. When it comes to Christian textual criticism of the Bible, it takes manuscripts of the Bible, which we know just of the New Testament, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies of the New Testament. And none of these copies are exactly the same. Not one single is exactly the same to the letter. So what a textual critic does is he sorts through all of these. He learns ancient Greek, ancient Hebrew, and Aramaic, and he tries to find out the date on these texts, and then which ones are the oldest, and not only which ones are the oldest, but which ones are the most original. So as I befriended him, I became a layman textual critic, because as he was studying, I was studying. I was his study partner. I was a person that he shot ideas off of. I read his papers, things of this nature, and I read his textbooks. I would listen, he would record some of the lectures, and I would listen to them. So I had already enrolled at Bob Jones and already decided my major was going to be textual criticism. And since that was the case, me and him together decided to take up a study of the Bible. We said to ourselves, and he told me that he said that if this is our book, this is what we call BIBLE, this is the basic instructions before leaving earth. Therefore, if this is the book, this is the Bible, we need to study it, we should know it, because this is what is going to get us into heaven. So we began studying the Bible, and we started from Genesis 1:1. And we decided we're going to read through it from beginning to end, beginning to end, beginning to end. And the Bible is a pretty big book, I will give it that. It's a pretty long read. And as I read the Bible, this is where I guess you can say the beginning of the end of the beginning. If that makes any sense. So hopefully by the end it makes some sense. As I started reading through the Bible, I began and I said, I'm going to read this analytically. I'm going to read this as a book. I'm going to take away from it all of my preconceived notions of it, because that's what a textual critic has to do. So I started reading the Bible, and as I got through the books of the Bible and started reading the stories of Noah, and I read that, and I knew that Noah was a prophet and all this, and I started reading in the Bible that the Bible says that Noah was a drunkard, as it puts it. And this is how he's referred to on a number of occasions in the Bible. And immediately something did not sit right with me. Because this was a story that you didn't hear in Sunday school. You heard that Noah built the ark and he saved humanity and he took 2 and 2 and all the animals and all this, but they didn't tell you the part about the Bible says that he was a drunkard. He was an alcoholic. So this caught me off guard. I said, where did this come from? So I started reading and I said, okay, this is what the Bible says. So then I would sit back and say, okay, how does that sit with me, knowing what I know about Christianity, my faith? How does it sit with me? And to be honest, it did not sit quite well, because I said to myself, and I had a picture in my mind of the prophets being the leaders of humanity. The prophets were the people chosen to be the leaders of humanity. Therefore, I pictured in my mind that therefore they would be the best of humanity. It just seemed to make sense with me. And alcoholism is a disease. And most alcoholics can barely hold down a job at McDonald's, much less build an ark to save humanity from a flood that's never happened. I said, so something didn't fit right this with me. I said, okay, maybe it's just, maybe it's just something wrong with me, so I need to keep going. So I kept going, and I got to the story of Lot. But then when it talks about when Lot his daughters got him drunk and slept with him, committed incest with him. This was not something I heard in Sunday school. And again, this did not sit right with me. So these things, one after another, really started to play with my emotions. I was trying to read this analytically just as a book, but I could not separate it with myself from what I've always learned and always been taught. So I started taking these things to the scholars at Bob Jones. I told my friend, he said, okay, let me take you to the people who can answer them better. First, I took them to my pastor at the church, and the pastor at my church told me, he said, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Brother Joshua, don't let a little bit of knowledge wreck your faith. That's exactly what he told me. Don't let a little bit of knowledge wreck your faith. He said, because faith is what leads to salvation, not knowledge. He said, faith is what is going to take you to paradise, not knowledge. He said, we are justified by faith. And he was quoting Paul. We are justified by faith, not by works. So I said, okay. But it was an answer that my mind understood, but my heart would not accept. So I went to the scholars at Bob Jones and started asking them about these things. And I started getting the same, it was almost like this was a recorded message from some of these people, because they would tell me the same thing, Brother Joshua, don't let a little bit of knowledge wreck your faith. The devil will give you 99% of the truth to get you to believe the 1% of falsehood.